Perfect, Professor Shin. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's my great pleasure to have the last talk of today. And we just have seen the presentation from Lilium from the industrial perspective. And during my presentation, I'd like to show you a bit the, let's say, the German and European view from research. And I say also European because I'm not only working for DLR as the German Aerospace Center, but also as the liaison officer at the EASA, and also coordinating the European research on UAM. But before we start, because we have seen the flying of tomorrow, urban air mobility, is this the flying of tomorrow? So even if I'm from DLR, I always love to have this comment or description by NASA to really describe what UAM really is. And when we have a look at the strategic point of view of this theme today, NASA already described it really good. It's really something that is completely new and exciting in aviation history, and it really is to build a new ecosystem. But let's start a bit with the history. It's not the really new idea of what we have here and what we can see, because when we have a look back 90 years ago, we've seen the first drafts of how it can be the mobility in cities with gyrocopters, with something that is directly connected between cars or road travel, railway travel, and flying. Then, let's say roughly 60 years ago, we had the first inventions of, well, how could it be to fly with a car? And it looks like the standard sedan, just with some fans. And even 30 years ago, we have something that might look quite similar to what we know. And if we have a look at today, we actually can find these type of vehicles still everywhere. So what is it that it makes so interesting? And why is it such a topic since after whatever 100 years already? So what really is the motivation behind, and why right now? I mean, first of all, right now, of course, now it's feasible by the technology, which it was not really during the past decades, although we have seen some kind of urban air mobility with flying helicopters in several cities and so on. But what is it right now, the motivation? Well, first of all, of course, there's the economic view. So in Germany, we just launched the US on Innovative Aviation Concepts, which is an action plan of the federal government. And this is something quite similar or the equivalent to KUAM. So where Germany tries to tackle this topic of UAS, urban air mobility, to see what is in there, what different applications, what is it really of a benefit for our society. So that's one hand, the economical scale in Germany itself. But then, of course, a really major stone or stepstone that we had, and also something that is a really huge boundary condition, is, of course, the European Green Deal, where everything now has the number one priority to be circular, economically friendly, which means it's not only that the economy counts, but really with regard to climate change, that everything is climate neutral. And then, of course, with regard to life cycle management with energy storage and using, that all this has to fit in this new Green Deal on the European scale. So this was the strategic view of, let's say, Germany and Europe look on it. If we go a bit further into research, then we've seen that you might all be aware of these Flight Path 2050 goals, which have a look for the decades in the future. And based on this, there was a committee building the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda several years ago, which is regularly updated. And there you have the aims of that 90% of travelers in Europe shall in the future be able to complete their journey, but really from door to door, when they leave their house until they reach their goal where they want to go within 4 hours. And there you can see that mobility has to change, because nowadays it takes way longer, of course, but there urban air mobility in terms of also connecting the mobility modes and not only flying is really an important point here. Also, I already mentioned it, global warming. So the climate change is something that, especially for such a new mobility mode as UAM, will be from the beginning a topic. And if we have a look at these different categories in order how to face the especially CO2 emission problem, then you can see it's, of course, efficiency improvement, biofuels, avoid and shift, so really using other means, but it's also the electrification. And when we have a look at electrification, because I mean, 50% is not everything, of course, but electrification will be still the major means to tackle this. And what is the general challenge of electrification? I mean, electrification, we talk about it in our daily life. Everything becomes more and more electric, less the standard fuels that we know. So in general, we talk about electrification of the transport system. So in the maritime sector, on the road, on the rails, really everywhere. And there, of course, aviation is one part. And the electrification of air transport, from the research perspective also, I mean, it tackles everything from small UAS, from the multicopters, which of course are already electric. But if you have a look at an A380 or A350, well, this size is, we're not about to see this thing flying electric in the future, not even the longer future, probably. So here's really to see how can we improve technology that we have more electrified flying, and up to what category is it really possible to fly fully electric with sustainable energy sources. And there, of course, urban air mobility is something where it becomes feasible, because there we have the category of small aircraft and UAS, which are definitely having an electric propulsion system, which can then be sustainable, where we are not limited due to the size or due to the weight to something where we need other propulsion means. So this is something where we can see, okay, there the motivation is definitely something that is realistic in terms of where we want to go. But what does it mean in terms of technology? So what is needed here? And there, I just mentioned it, it's small aircraft. So what does it mean, small aircraft? I mean, since decades, we have the general aviation sector. So there are already small aircrafts, but I mean, urban air mobility with the Cessna is not that what everyone wants to do at the moment. And although this sector is the largest in terms of number of aircrafts worldwide, but still it's not technically up to date. There are some light aircrafts which were built during the last years or decades, which received some updates, but we're not there yet. So the whole span in the general aviation and UAM sector will focus on completely new aircraft class. So here we will having something that is from an autonomous air taxi without a pilot up to, let's say, a 9-seater, which is still urban air mobility. I come to this aspect later. But here you can see the variety of aircraft will be enormous. So there are a lot of different aircraft that we will see, really with completely different design concepts, with differently propulsion systems. But at least the motivation that we've seen so far is the same for those. And we're not only talking about new design of those new aircrafts, we're also talking about the subsystem technology. So what is needed to have urban air mobility? So integrated modular avionics, new flight control systems, so everything that is not really needed at the moment. Because if you usually have a pilot on board with the standard aviation regulations, it's just not that necessary. Of course, the civil aircraft are already equipped with a lot of systems, but not that you can just instantly use it for automated flying in urban environments. And then, of course, we're not building everything completely new. We will definitely rely on a lot of expertise that we have during the last, or received during the past decades in aeronautics. So especially in terms of handling qualities, when you imagine flying in a downtown environment, it really becomes essential, dealing with the environmental effects there, like wind gusts and so on, that these small aircraft have still a brilliant stability, and that even without a pilot, you have some really stable configurations, no matter where and where you're flying. So this is the aircraft part. Then, of course, we have new flight routes. The symposium is, of course, urban air mobility, but this is quite a broad topic. At the moment, we see that there are different definitions of these. Even NASA is talking about advanced air mobility, because they've seen we're not just limited to urban, not to the city, the mega city downtown. So we have also, let's say, inter-urban transportation, where we connect smaller cities or metropolitan areas. We also have even regional travel, or let's say thin haul routing, where we connect even the suburbs and a bit further regions. And we just seen the Lilium presentation, when they want to fly about 200, 300 kilometers. It's not urban anymore, but still that's the idea of how we want to fly and what kind of vehicles we want to use. So this is something that the type of flying and the routes will definitely change, because at the moment we go to one airport, we have to travel there 50, 70 kilometers, flying from there a longer route to somewhere else, where we are again usually outside the city, where we have to get back to the city by another transportation mode. So here we will definitely fly a bit differently. And even just an example, Germany is quite a small country with regard to the size. But even we have several hundreds of airfields, not all of them completely active, of course, not international airports, but airfields that allow takeoff and landing for such small aircraft, that it means if we have a look at these airfield infrastructure, that's also possible to really introduce such a new mode, not even flying from some places in a city or in an international airport that we know. So there we already had an infrastructure. So it's not only that we talk about vehicles and that they fly from point A to point B in the future, which is a bit different. It's also infrastructures that, of course, we talk about urban infrastructures, where we see all the concepts that we have worldwide from Uber, from volocopters, so that they have some vertiports, skyports, no matter how they call it. That's, of course, one option to do it that way. But I just mentioned we have some regional airfields worldwide. Every country has several of them. And that's also a part of, if you want to introduce the new transportation mode, it's not only that you just land or take off there, because we had it that these new vehicles, if they are equipped with, let's say, new electric motors, with batteries, or even with hydrogen, you of course have to provide it at these airfields. So the whole infrastructure, also in terms of how your airfields or airports have to look like, have to provide these new energy sources. So it's your vertiport in the city, or on the rooftop of a skyscraper, or on your airfield. They definitely need something to provide the energy. And this means that you also have a look at the infrastructure from the research side. So really how to provide this new environment which is necessary for UAM. And of course, if you see the picture on the lower right, that is still the aim, to connect all these modes, that we really fulfill the aim of stepping out of one vehicle, getting to the next one, no matter what kind of transportation mode it is. So that is really the perspective, how we have to change our environment completely, with regards to the technology or technological needs of such a flying vehicle. When it comes to autonomy, because this is, let's say, the fascinating part of UAM, that of course we will see in the next years the vehicle flying still with a pilot, but it's getting more and more automated, and the highest goal is still autonomy, that you don't even have to supervise it or maximum supervise it. But there, to tackle the topic of autonomy, you can see there are a lot of different aspects and even categories. So when you have a look at the blue ones here, that's more the technological side. That's the standard side, what every aeronautical design process or development process is all about, where you have the flight controls, airworthiness, sensors for navigation and communication, and so on. The other part is, of course, traffic management. So the urban airspace integration is really something that is, no matter if you fly in an urban environment or regional, the airspace is something that will be highly affected due to these new vehicles. But it's not only the airspace and the management of it, it's also, with regard to the three red aspects, everything else. So the social acceptance, the environmental aspects, human factors, the risk assessment. There are so many different aspects to tackle that from research. It's not the standard process anymore with regard to UAM. So before it was to design an aircraft was an aeronautical process. It's not anymore. So especially when we have a look at DLR, which has not only aeronautical research, it has space research, it has energy and transport research and security. Everything is mixed now because you need the expertise of all these different research areas to really go for UAM as a whole, and not only considering the vehicle, but really the whole system. And just an example, at DLR, we have really a broad variety of different institutions with their thematic focus. So really, as you can see here, really standard classical aeronautical topics such as elasticity, aerodynamics, composite structures, and so on. But you find also really completely new topics, as of, for example, aerospace medicine, where we have not only medical physical doctors, but also psychologists, personnel, where we really go for the topics of societal acceptance, really what kind of effects have these new mobility modes such as UAM with regards to the perception of, we had it in the talks before, due to noise, due to light emissions. Is it disturbing for really people who live in an urban environment if we have such a transportation all around? So here we go now for really way more topics than we did in the past. And this describes really a good way how complex this topic of urban mobility really is. And then, of course, sustainability. That is something we had it in the motivation. And what does it mean when it comes to technologies and the research? Of course, we have already, by designing, by producing the new vehicles, why they maintain them, and also how to recycle them in the future. So, of course, when you think about production, it's weight and cost reduction. This is essential for UAM in the future. That if we want to sell the product, or if we want to provide a service, it has to be cost efficient. So weight and cost reduction is really essential here. But at the same time, you have to meet the circular economy conditions, so that really the whole thing is, from the development and production process up to the recycling process, has to fulfill the sustainable conditions. And this makes it really hard in the future to see how to get along with this. So that's so far just as an overview of what does it mean. And the result is that we have UAM really as a holistic approach, that we have, of course, a new mobility mode, which needs new aircrafts, which needs new roads, which needs new infrastructures. But what makes it so charming, that it's a new ecosystem that will really transform our cities a lot, and especially that we have it as an autonomous ecosystem afterwards, which is at the same time a climate neutral application. So this is really the boundary conditions that we see so far for the topic. So what does it mean for research? When we have a look at the European landscape at the moment, then we just have a lot of topics. Of course, I mean, I just described it briefly what goes along with UAM, but let me just talk about these 4 topics and how Europe, or let's say the European research community, go for this topic. So when we have a look at autonomy, these are just 2 examples of DLR. what does it mean just to have the aim of autonomy? That means you go step by step the automation processes from the pilot assisted systems up to, let's say, something that needs only an optionally piloted, then in the future perhaps it is remotely piloted, then supervised, and then perhaps at one day completely autonomous. That means, of course, you need new sensors. You need to investigate how, for example, some aspects as artificial intelligence could help here. Neural networks that we will find already in several areas of flight guidance systems. And here, again, you have to have a look at the whole system, the vehicle, UTM system, and the whole application. So there are, of course, different aspects of how it can look like. So unmanned flight operation, where you have an A340 completely automated, or in the really low scale, or let's say smaller size class, where you have automated low air delivery, which is then automatically routing through the landscape and avoiding areas completely by itself. So these are research projects that we conduct, also feasibility studies to see what is possible and then what can be used and adapted for to UAM. Of course, urban airspace integration, one of these concepts that is completely necessary if you want to introduce UAM. And as any other, also at DLR, we have blueprints really to see how can you really create such a new environments, new methods and tools to do it. But of course, it's not that you just write a concept and you do it on your own, not at all. We have seen that it's really more and more important that research connects with the regulatory side. So we are more and more closely interacting with the regulators. So, for example, since 2 years, we have now even closer cooperation with EASA, that we involve them in our development processes, because research, it's quite difficult or quite risky even, that you do your research, you have your projects, and at the very end, you see that in terms of certification and all the new regulations that we know, or let's say need for UAS and for UAM, that they don't comply with what your research has created. So there it really helps on the research side to get in contact, to integrate the regulators into your research. And of course, on the European side, we have our national agencies for every country, but EASA is something that is really relevant for us. Just to have a look at it for UAM, or the urban airspace integration, as a small comparison of EASA and FAA. They have a lot of similarities, still something different, but that also is something we need standards. If you want to fly outside your country, and UAM is such a topic, that's not something that you do on a national scale. So that is something where we need international standard, international consent of how this should look like. And of course, with regard to UAM, the certified category, that is what we are looking here, transportation of persons from A to B, and that is still heavily under construction, while the other areas, or the other risk class of open and specific categories for UAS, they are quite well defined already, and this is going, but for the certified class, it's still something to work on. And if we have a look at EASA, for the next year, for 2021, they are planning finally the EASA regulations for the certified category. And at the moment, they go for three operation types. So the first one is really something, as my previous example, so really having like a cargo drone, but even at the size of an A340, transporting a cargo from, what is it here, Paris to New York. So this is something that's for them the operation type 1, just as a let's say the simplest part. Operations type 2, something cargo but smaller and used in urban environments. Operations type 3, something as Lilium will really have the personal transport. Another topic, electric propulsion. So this, of course, is of really high interest to see what is necessary and feasible here. And of course, electric and hydrogen power is that what everyone is aiming for. But the problem is we have said the small aircraft, so the thermal management and the structure and aerodynamic integration. So how you put all these systems that are necessary for electric sustainable flying, for automated flying, how can you put them in these small aircraft, and especially if they should take off vertically, then you really have a small or limited amount of weight and structure integration area to do this. So this is really something really, really important. Also, again, some DLR examples. There we are looking with regard to fuel cells development on every scale. So really from the small 45 kW fuel cell up to really 0.5 megawatt, where we can even, let's say, have an engine for one of our 19-seaters. And so these technology demonstrators, this is something we are aiming here. Infrastructure, of course, we have a lot of infrastructures during the last decades, but what is it really necessary here? What kind of research infrastructure do you need for UAM, for the whole UAM research and development process? And there we had, during several years, a European research project, RINGO, so the identification of aviation research infrastructures. And there's one part that has a focus on UAS and UAM. So we need to see on the European landscape in every country what is needed. So what is there as infrastructure? What kind of infrastructure of those is really an appropriate infrastructure to use? Which of them it has to be modernized, and what kind of infrastructure has to be built completely new, which is not existent anymore? And based on this, we've seen that we need a lot of new UAS infrastructures, and we do it in Germany together with other research and industrial partners, even with the government. We do it in Europe together with our European partners, and of course internationally to see what kind of infrastructures are there within our partner organizations. How we can share these infrastructures, how we can learn from their experiences. And one result was that Germany decided to have the National Test Center for UAS. So really an area where you especially can do these high-risk campaigns, where you can test all the different technologies. And they're really to see when it comes to an air taxi, you cannot just test it in your backyard. They need really a segregated airspace, closed ground areas, so really where you are free to test everything that you want. And this aircraft was bought by DLR, for example, last year, and is at the moment modernized that you really have a proper basis in the future for the development of UAS, for the test, so everything that comes with urban air mobility. And there is really to see the technological demonstration. But also in Europe, we have the conceptual demonstrations. So there are at the moment a lot of demonstrator projects, so really cities or regions that work together on the topic of urban air mobility, really to see how you can implement them in the future, in the daily life, and what, for example, problems go along with what has to be done here. And on the research, we do it with our counterparts. So in Germany, it's DLR. And in other 13 countries, there are similar research entities. And there we coordinate urban air mobility on the European research level amongst all these partners. So all these partners go for the same strategy, go for, of course, they have some individual strategies in their establishments, but in total, we do the projects there together. We coordinate every activity there. And this is some kind of activity that is led by DLR and really has a focus on urban air mobility for all these partners. And that is what I want to show you as the last slide here. That is currently the European strategy for UAM. So really the roadmap where all the research organizations in Europe want to go for this topic of urban air mobility within the next, let's say, 20 years. So this is something the roadmap that we want to follow. And you can see that goes from strategies for mobility over the environmental aspects, feasibility studies, technology demonstration, automation and autonomy, and of course, urban airspace integration. And that is something from the research perspective where we want to go in the future. And there, of course, it's not only that we do it on a national scale or on the European landscape, but there, of course, we collaborate a lot with international partners. And there, of course, we would be happy to cooperate with Korea. And I would be happy to receive the questions and hear from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was very good talk, kind of representing not only German perspective and then as well as a European perspective. So we have one question at the moment from the audience. So I guess it's quite interesting question. So Germany is quite well known for automobile industry. So the question is whether any of those showing interest in jumping into UAM business.
Yes. But not only one. The thing is, I think I might say not everyone, but let's say nearly most of our German automotive industrial partners are really looking for this. Because, of course, they also are quite focused at the moment on the electrification of their cars. So they have a lot of to do to even fulfill this. But, of course, it's quite charming for them. So, and we can see that really the huge companies that are also active worldwide, they are partnering up even also with international partners, with aeronautical partners, because for them, it's really an attractive new way of mobility. So, of course, that you have BMW, Audi, Volkswagen, they are all going for these topics. They are all interested in to see how they can connect the road transport with the flying mobility. So yeah, that is something nearly all of them are really interested in, let's say, air taxi. And of course, we can learn a lot from them with regard to, let's say, the propulsion, because they are dealing with this, let's say, power size class electrically since quite a while. They have a lot of fuel cell experience and energy storage. So that's really also helpful to have the automotive industry on board here.
Okay. Actually, I also have a couple of questions from myself. So the first question is there any kind of near-term planned route about UAM inside the Europe?
It's well, I think you might refer to what you have in the KUAM, where you already define flying from one place to another. There are, of course, some ideas of how you can connect what, let's say, a city with its airport. But let's say on the national and the European scale, it's not like a political instrument at the moment that we officially announce something like this. So there you can see that still the companies or the research organizations, they are addressing this with their ideas. But it's not that there's a master plan of what would be the first connection officially to have with personal transportation from A to B. So there, Korea is a bit ahead at the moment. So we are really focusing on the technologies. And if you see what's our task as research, especially for DLR in Germany, our task is really to help the industry. So if you have companies such as Volocopter or Lilium, they are really brilliant. They do a really good work. They are at the moment, they have a lot of attraction worldwide, but they are quite new. So in a lot of cases, for example, autonomy or other aspects, they need, let's say, also help from research. And it's us to enable them, really to help them to go the next steps. So from the research perspective is really, we don't have a product. So usually we don't go for, DLR says, hey, we want to fly from Berlin to Paris in 3 years. That's not our task. So we are really focusing on the research projects together with industry, together with research partners to see how we can enable it. But I would love to see some kind of connection, as you described it in KUM, to see that we even have it flying in Europe here. Yeah.
Okay. I have a second question. So it may be a little bit sensitive as well. So from the map you have shown earlier about the collaborative research, I don't see a pin in the UK. Is it because Brexit or UK, and there's no UK company interested in this development, or?
No. We of course we do collaborate with the UK. The only thing is they are not official member of this area consortium, and they have something that is a bit similar to what you call a research organization, but in fact they lack of such a organizational structure. So they have, let's say, research institutes, but they are not really the equivalent to what we have, for example, the DLR, HONORA, NLR. So the research organizations that we have in other European member states, they don't have really the equivalent. So we do work with the universities there, with the industrial partners there, but they are not as with one official partner in this network. And of course, with Brexit, it's now getting more difficult because with regard to European projects, it's way easier if you are inside the European Union, and then you can share the results easily. You can really work together in the laboratories. But it's of course also possible with international partners. So that's quite easy to have even with Korea, the research projects. But now for the UK, it's getting, of course, a bit more difficult if you're not in the, let's say, the European club.